Hey everyone, thanks for joining All Bodies Outside. This is Brian Peterson, and I am really thrilled that Nickademus De La Rosa is joining us on All Bodies Outside. He has done so much in the world of ultra running and adventure racing, and it is just super inspiring that he's here. He's someone that I have had the fortunate luck to go running with a number of times, and I've always loved running with him, always felt like I learned new stuff, and he's just a great person. And he runs a company called Lightfoot Coaching. And for those of you out there that are looking for maybe a running coach, I recommend checking out Lightfoot Coaching. Their website is lightfootcoaching.org. And the reason that I think you should check it out is not just because of Nick's big accomplishments in the world of ultra running, and these are really big accomplishments, but he has also overcome a lot of personal experiences, and he's able to bring a great holistic approach to his coaching that is this physical part to it. He's into diet, he's into the psychology of it, and it's just a great service that he offers. And he runs Lightfoot Coaching with his wife Jade, who's also in ultra running, and they are just doing great stuff there. So if you're looking for a running coach, check out lightfootcoaching.org. And before we get started, I'm going to read off of the Lightfoot Coaching website, Nick's bio. So Nick completed his first marathon at the age of 15 and his first 100-miler just a few years later. By 19, he was the youngest person ever to complete the notorious Badwater 135-miler across Death Valley. And I believe he actually finished it another time too after that too. So he's finished Badwater twice. Nick has an extensive race resume with wins at Fat Dog 120-miler, Cruel Jewel 100-miler, and Orcas Island 100-miler. He is best known for his second place at Tour de Gens, which I believe is a 205-mile race, and most notably his finish and win at the 2013 Barkley Marathons. And the Barkley Marathons, it's give or take on the miles every year, I believe, but it's probably around 115 to 130. And it's arguably the hardest race in the world. I'm sure people can probably say something about some other races, but Barkley is one of those races that I've always been too intimidated to even start. So to finish and win it is amazing, a huge accomplishment. In 2018, Nick had open heart surgery to repair an aneurysm. And at that point, the doctor referred to him as a ticking time bomb. It's really scary. Since then, he has become particularly interested in the psychological aspects of running endurance sports. And that's something that we're really going to discuss a bunch today, is the psychological aspects of running endurance distances. Nick is currently studying sport and performance psychology to work with athlete identities, pre-race anxieties, and help create a stable sense of self regardless of race outcome. He's especially interested in working with former professional athletes who are looking to transition toward a healthy love of their chosen sport again. So as I mentioned before, if you're looking for a coach, check out Lightfoot Coaching. And hey, Nick, great to see you and great to have you here. I am really stoked that you're here.
Thanks so much, Brian. Thanks so much for having me on your podcast. It's a lovely concept, and glad that you brought it to fruition, and so glad to be here with you, man.
Yeah. It's a wonderful way to give back to just outdoor recreation. And then something that both you and I love, and that we'll discuss a bunch today, is ultra running. And that's something that will always be a part of my life. I'm sure it'll always be a part of your life. And ultra running comes with a lot to it. And we're going to be hearing from Nick today. So Nick, you got started with ultra running at a young age, and you had a ton of success, a lot of great accomplishments, things that people only dream of doing. What was that like to do that at such a young age?
Yeah, I got started in ultra running at the age of, what the heck was I? I was about 12, 13 years old when I first watched my mom. I was 13 years old when I first watched my mom complete a marathon shortly after my parents' divorce. And watching my mom complete that marathon and the kind of like just freedom on top of the world type feeling that she had. My parents had just gotten divorced, so I was feeling like kind of low and just didn't really have much of an identity or much to grasp onto. New schools, that kind of thing, not fitting in, wearing weird goth clothing of like the early 2000s. watching my mom just look like she was on top of the world after completing a marathon, I really wanted to do one myself. And in addition to that, I think what was going on in my head was simultaneously, my mom was working as a single mom, so wasn't around the house as much. So I was simultaneously dealing with a little bit of what's called childhood neglect, or just, a latchkey kid, essentially, where I'm not trying to go woe is me, but the typical, like, you get home from school and then you're alone until 7 or 8 p.m. at night or whatever, when your sister gets picked up from childhood care, and your mom comes home finally at 7 or 8 at night or something like that. And so you're like not quite making yourself dinner, but you're alone for an extended period of time. And so I was simultaneously seeking validation. And as a result of that sort of journey for validation there, couldn't handle being mediocre. And what I mean by that, I didn't want to do team sports. I didn't want to do football. I didn't want to do things that I wouldn't stand out in middle school and in freshman year. I did cross country as a freshman, so 15 years old, but I didn't stand out in it. I wasn't the best. There was, seniors and stuff like that who were way faster than I was, of course. They had way more years of experience, and I was a mediocre cross country runner, and that really turned me off. I wasn't getting the validation that external validation that I wanted, that I craved, that I wasn't getting at home. I wasn't getting that validation at home. And so I craved it elsewhere, and then I wasn't getting in cross country. So it was like, where else can I get this? Oh, I can go be unique by being the youngest kid I know to go do a marathon. I can suffer through a marathon, and then I'll be the greatest. I'll just run the longest. If I can't run the fastest, then I'll just run the longest, and I'll be the best 15-year-old who can run the longest. And so it was a 3:29 was my first marathon at the age of 15 at the San Diego Rock and Roll, and that kind of started me off in that direction of longer distance running and stuff, and started turning all the wheels for that kind of identity in identifying as a individual who runs long distances, who does hard things. Started the wheel in that direction.
Yeah, man, you said a 3:29 at the age of 15 for your first marathon.
Yeah. So
that's impressive. I did my
pretty decent.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's faster than my first marathon. I think I did it at probably 23 years old, and I think I did a 4:05 at the Long Beach Marathon.
Oh, man. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice, man.
So anyways, I thought it was really interesting that you brought up this formulation of identity. And, identity is something that's really strong. And I think that you've obviously thought about it a lot and whatnot. And so you're formulating this identity for yourself. And so how did that then kind of put you into a trajectory?
So that absolutely, exactly. It was a trajectory is exactly where I started to begin with it. And so that was, probably the first thing that began in that direction, was just like, I can't handle being mediocre. Okay. And it was kind of like whatever the path of least resistance was, whatever I would stand out more in. So I was into both acting in high school, and then I was also into cross country in high school. And when I would do better in cross country, well, then I was a cross country runner. And if I was doing better in acting or got a lead role, well, then screw cross country. I'm not a runner, I'm an actor. And I would sort of undulate between the two of those based on which one I excelled at more. But I call it the path of least resistance in the regard of, like, I wasn't going to stick through mediocrity or stick to something unless I got immediate results and started getting pretty immediate validation for it. And as a result of that, I watched my teammates over the 4 years that I was in cross country get better and better and better than me. Cause they would do track and stuff like that during the spring. And I refused to do track because I knew I wouldn't instantly be good at track. And so during the spring, that was when I'd often do a marathon or go biking with my friends or do some other sport or something like that until that kind of put me on the path where at the age of 17, 18 range, a kind of close friend of mine was diagnosed with acute myelogenous leukemia, and his sort of journey through cancer there at an early age, he was 18 going on 19, had just graduated from high school, and that journey that he went on through cancer and stuff kind of prompted an idea in me. And I'm being honest here. It was, if you're kind of following this, like, I couldn't be mediocre. I needed this external validation. I had this compulsion to get external validation, to be noticed, to be the best, to be sort of loud and look at me, what I'm doing. I had that need, and that really came to life with what was called my senior project at the age of 18 at Poway High School. And it was I chose to run 3,000 miles over the 10 months that the school year endured, and I chose to raise $10,000 for my friend Andrew. And in doing that, that was such a massive project relative to, my friend was rebuilding a car with his dad. Another friend was, picking up trash for a week in some part of the community. And I just had some project that, in my mind was just like so far above and beyond everybody else's thing. And it was just like, whoa, look at this Nickademus guy, just like killing it. And as a media stunt, I ran 100 miles around a high school track. And that was my first 100 miler, was 400 laps around a track, for Andrew, and just had people, donate 10 cents, 50 cents here, $1 here. But if you're kind of getting my flow here, there was this undercurrent here where it's not like, oh yeah, I'm doing this 100% out of the goodness of my heart for Andrew so that I can raise money for cancer. That was the external message. The internal message, and the part that I was massively benefiting from, and that was also furthering my identity, was this: here's this crazy guy. Whoa, Nick's so crazy. Whoa, Nick's so cool. Look at him. Whoa, look at what Nick can do. Oh, look at this, all this media that Nick's getting. Oh, look, he's on TV. And I was just lapping that up, man. I was just taking that all in, and just that part of me that had been sort of, that had felt neglected throughout childhood and stuff like that, and had felt ignored and stuff like that, was just like, yes, give me all the media attention, give me all the glory and stuff like that. I'll do 100 miles easy. I can get through that. No problem. And it was ironic, in the regard of like, I could run 100 miles around a high school track without an issue, with media following me and stuff like that. No problem at all. But that 10-mile run that was like, yeah, part of the 3,000 mile for the Cure project, but that like no one would know if I cheated, no one would know if I did. That was really hard to do. That was really, I'd be like 4 or 5 miles into that, and think, oh, so many better things to do. I was so tired. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. And the only thing that I would be against is my own internal integrity and my honesty, versus 100-mile, like where everyone's watching me and the whole media and the world's watching me and all this extrinsic attention and everything like that. Oh, dude, I could have been 1,000 miles. But when it came to just me and myself alone out there, and no one cares and no one notices, that was when it was really, really, really hard for me. And there was no extrinsic attention, that it was really hard for me internally to care even about running.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective that you brought up there, and it with the kind of extrinsic and the intrinsic there, almost clashing. They did clash. And, going out on the track, there wasn't the media there, and, the getting that media to show you and to validate you, versus the intrinsic aspect. Like, I mean, I get that, especially at a young age. I mean, I think that that's something that, at a young age, we're formulating our identity, and we're looking for validation from a lot of places. It's comforting. And, I think that that's something that definitely happens with people and whatnot. And I feel like I can list off some experiences with myself, and that's happened.
Yeah. So if we follow on that track, that's exactly how then I led, continuing on that exact trajectory, being, 100 miles at the age of 18. And then like, you can see how it was an easy jump then to Badwater 135 at the age of 19, and being like, oh, well, I got really well known for doing this 3,000 for the Cure thing. And then there was this big lull where I went to college, and I actually got like, if I had been clinically diagnosed, I'm sure I would have passed all the tests for depression, where I had some sort of mild depression immediately in college upon just, whoa, nobody cares who the F I am here. Nobody knows me. Nobody cares what I do. Nobody cares that I run. Nobody cares that I did 3,000 miles. Nobody cares that I run 100 miles. They're just concerned about their things. And it was like, all of a sudden in college, I was like, this internal crisis of, how the hell do I stand out here? And then it was again, this compulsion, this massive, oh man, I got to do something freaking huge, man. I gotta create my own category. I gotta be the youngest to do something. I know I can't win Badwater right now. Or I didn't think I could win Badwater. I can be the youngest to do Badwater. Okay, sure. Yeah, let's do Badwater. And that was, what prompted me to email Chris Gossman and work my way into the race and everything like that, and be there at the age of 19.
Yeah. And so was it the first time or the second time you did Badwater that you won it?
I didn't. I've not won Badwater any of the times. I was just
twice,
saying, like, I finished it twice. No, there's some real good folks there who were there both 2009 and 2010. That was with Akos Konya and David Goggins days.
Okay. I remember I used to get really upset at myself and pretty much anyone that was nearby if I had a bad race in college cross country, and it would just like ruin my day. And I remember my college coach at the time given this lecture about how nobody in China cares how I ran. And the reason that he chose China is because it has a big population. He's like, I guarantee you not a single person in China cares how you ran. So get over it. You had a bad day, move on. But I was certainly, I wanted to get to the finish line in a race and have a good race so that the family and the friends and my teammates and the coach was like, good job, Brian. And like, I was looking for that type of validation in my college cross country. And I get just so pissed off. And it's like, it really didn't matter. Like my coach said, not a single person in China knew that I was running those races. Not a single person in China was following who I was, but gosh, I was certainly wanted people to see me run a good race. And, I think one thing that's really tough with wanting to run a good race or wanting to do more and more hardcore stuff to seek that validation is the pressure that comes with all of that. There's a lot of just internal pressure to, go after the next adventure that's bigger and better and harder and, more crazy than anything out there, or run, a really fast race. And that type of pressure, I think actually can be detrimental towards race psychology when you're towing the start line at the start of a race. If you're putting that type of psychology and pressure on yourself to begin with, I think it could be detrimental towards the race. And that's something that took me a while to recognize. It took me a long time to recognize. Yeah,
I would absolutely agree with you, man. When you toe the line, when you look at like the origins of where pre-race anxiety and stuff comes from, it's often, its origin is going to more lie in those extrinsic pressures that you put on yourself, whether that's internalized as, I have to do this in order to get the validation from my mother in order to be a good son, or some sort of message of that, or, I'm not worthy as what my message was eventually was, I'm not worthy as a person. I'm not worthy as an individual. I'm not worthy of living to that weird degree for me. If I don't win, or if I don't do well at this thing, if I don't finish this thing, then I'm a worthless piece of blank, and, and that was the message that I carried with. So you can imagine so many, I'm notorious, and you remember training with me back in the day. Like, I would start freaking fast, man. And that's pre-race anxiety coming there. Unless I keep up with Brian on this, 10-mile tempo run through Mission Trails, man, I'm worthless. So I better keep up with him right off the bat, man. And that's pre-race anxiety versus like you look at, other pros like Jeff Browning and stuff who are a bit older and just have this sense of self, the sense of self-worth and everything like that. And I'm diving into his psychology without knowing him much, but, can just start off slow and can start off easy. And that's how you ID what I would call a mature athlete is can a mature athlete can start off real slow, real easy and stuff like that. And know that their strategy, their pace, their race and everything like that, is going to come out when it comes out, and they're doing their best, but they don't got anything to prove to anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that type of psychology is the best path towards success. And, a tool that's effective for me, I don't know if it would be called an effective tool for other people or an effective tool at all, but I know going into races. So the last race I did was a 100-miler, a Bighorn 100 in Wyoming. And I brought my now wife with me to crew, and it was her first time being at an ultra. She was my girlfriend at the time. We weren't engaged, and she's going to crew me through this 100-mile race. And I remember the night before we were talking about like, how do we think the race is going to play out? And I was like, hey, if I just finish, that's a success. Like we should have a great time afterwards, go get a big meal, have a beer, whatever. And I was like, you know what? It's just icing on the cake if I go sub 24 hours. If that happens, then that's great. If it doesn't, I still finish and that's still success. And so I kind of lower my expectations that way going into a race. And I found that to be really helpful for me. And then, as you mentioned, having that expectation lowered, I'm able to control my pace because I don't have as much anxiety to hit like a big time goal.
That's nice. And it's funny because the irony there, and that's exactly what I did, like a similar strategy at the Kodiak 100 that I did in August, was kind of a similar strategy where it was just like, okay, my first goal for this is to just finish so I do what's called an inverted pyramid, which is similar to what you just mentioned, where like most people will say like, you know, they'll do the normal pyramid of, oh, my goal is 20 hours. And then I want to be, and then if I don't get 20 hours, then I'll be sub 24 hours. And if I don't get sub 24, well, then I just want to finish. And you sort of, with that strategy, that's a typical pyramid. You lose as you go. So you lose the ability to hit 20 hours and you lose the ability to hit 24 hours. Then you sort of have to keep reframing and be like, well, I guess I'm happy with finishing. Versus if you flip that pyramid and you focus on just finishing first, and then you say, okay, at 12 hours, I'm going to look around and see where I'm at for time and see if 24 hours makes sense. Okay, 12 hours in. Yeah, 24 hours makes sense. Okay. And then at 18 hours, I'm going to look around and see if a faster time makes sense. Oh, look, I'm on pace for 20 hours. Okay, well, I'm going to go try and do 20 hours. And then you nail that. And it's a reverse pyramid. So you win as you go doing it that direction. And same thing with your method there, is it just, by having those peak performances, at least in the ultra world, exist, at least what I've seen in coaching and everything like that, with the athletes I've worked with and with myself, is peak performances occur in sort of a vacuum of pressure. It's often like not the 10K race that's coming up for 3 months that you can develop this anticipatory anxiety towards, but this sort of like 10K that I just threw at you on Thursday that you can't anticipate, and that just sort of happened, that you happen to have one of your best performances at because you had no expectations of yourself for. And that's when you get a best performance, strangely. So it's like, how can we create that during races and pre-races and stuff? So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. So two things there. First one, I never have explained, I'm so glad the way that you explained that. It was really well explained, of kind of just going up and more, you're setting yourself up for success with those goals by going from, kind of like just finish down to higher goals, versus losing yourself with, slower and slower goals. And then that's more psychologically harder to digest. And so I've never thought about it that way. I think like I started doing that though as a protective measure too, though, of going back to cross country races in college and finishing and being really pissed off. Like I didn't want to be like that anymore. And I didn't enjoy being like that. That's not who I am as a person. And, but sometimes racing does that to you. And so I think it was a bit of a tool for me to protect myself in a way. Secondly, though, going back to what at the end of your explanation there, I remember in college cross country, we had a race up at UC Riverside, and we drove up the morning of from San Diego, and we got there, like 10 minutes before the start. And it was just like, oh man, everyone's race is ruined. Dude. Like we're showing up in our vans 10 minutes before. And so I ended up having my best race of the season that day. Like I had all expectations out of the door because I didn't get to warm up. I didn't get to stretch. I didn't get to like get into the zone. Nothing like that. Ended up having the best race of the season. Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool, man. That's cool.
Yeah. It was amazing. So as you went through and did all of these just amazing accomplishments. I mean, they are really, really big time accomplishments. I've only done 6 100-mile races. You've done probably 3 times as much, 4 times as much. You have a lot of yeah. So eventually got to a point though, and you went to the doctor. One doctor kind of noticed something, but at that point it wasn't as severe as an outlook is. And then you went to the doctor again, and the doctor said, "Oh my gosh, you're a ticking time bomb." What happened there?
Yeah. So it was in 2013. I just finished the Barkley marathons, and then I think it was like 3 days later, I did a mountain marathon event out in Anza-Borrego, east of San Diego, and did a race out there like 3 days after Barkley, which was totally stupid. And then of course, like after that, I was feeling terrible, and I was having trouble breathing. Like my breathing was kind of funky, and Jade was noticing like I was kind of wheezing when I was sleeping. And she was like, okay, that's a little bit like, I've seen you recover from things before. That seems a little bit abnormal, weird. You should go get that checked out. And then I went to the doctor, got that checked out. just my breathing and stuff. And he's like, "Oh, you're a 100-mile athlete. You should get an echocardiogram done just to make sure your heart's safe." And in doing that, he found what's called a bicuspid versus a tricuspid aortic valve. And it opens smaller than a tricuspid will open a larger valve, so a higher gradient of pressure can travel through it, versus a bicuspid will open a lot smaller. So it's a narrower, it's a higher amount of pressure that travels through that smaller valve. As a result of that, you can form an aneurysm on your aortic wall. And that's what he noticed, was the bicuspid valve and the beginnings of an aneurysm at what's normally 3.3 centimeters on your ascending aortic wall. And mine was 4.3 centimeters. So a little bit bigger, but not huge. And then, so he was like, "Well, you should get this checked up on yearly." And then, 4 years went by before I checked up on it again. And then, when I finally got it checked up on in 2017, that was when the doctor was like, "Yeah, 5.1, 5.2 centimeters. You should probably have that, they start to kind of burst. And you start to maybe have some issues there. Issues being like sudden death. When an aneurysm bursts, you want to watch out for that around 6 centimeters. And I might be scrapping this. I might be talking millimeters, not centimeters, but, so I was at 5.2 centimeters, and, I had Ultra Trail Mount Fuji coming up in April when he told me in November. And I was like, okay, I've got to go pace my wife at Grand Canyon rim to rim this weekend, but I'll listen to your advice after that. So I went and did that, and then calmed down a bit and stuff like that. And then it was already in January that I had it was a preemptive surgery. So I never had the aneurysm burst or anything like that. So it was a surgery to prevent the bursting of that aneurysm.
Yeah, and that's something that's quite current, actually. What happened to you is quite current right now, and I'm sure you're aware of the tragic story of Grant Wall over at the World Cup. I think he was a journalist over there. I don't really know his story. I just know that I saw in the news that Grant Wall passed away due to an aortic aneurysm, and that was only maybe a week or two ago, and it really can result in sudden death, as you mentioned.
They're very serious.
Yeah. So you were then diagnosed with an aortic aneurysm, and what happened next?
So then, the surgery was essentially, it removed, when you go under, you don't know exactly what's going to happen. They're like, we're hoping we can save your bicuspid valve, but if we don't, you're going to wake up with a mechanical valve, which would have been disastrous at like the age of I was 28 at the time. And to have a mechanical valve at 28 years old, that's something you get put in when you're maybe 70 or something like that, 60s.
Oh, wow.
But a mechanical valve you'd have to be on, not blood thinners, but, blood thinners. You'd have to be on blood thinners, which would just, as a result of that, just lower my beats per minute and lower my cardiac output significantly. So that may be something I face in the next 20 or 30 years of my life, which will suck. At the same time, it keeps me alive. So how much does it suck? But anyways, I had a Dacron tube, which is basically like a super fancy piece of plastic that hopefully lasts longer than my life, put in where the aneurysm was. And that was, that's the main thing that I had done.
Yeah. And so I definitely struggle when I can't run. And I have a lot of friends that struggle when they can't run. And I'm talking simple, like, hey, like my shin is hurting or whatever. I'm going to take a week off and let this kind of what appears to be a shin splint go away and reduce in inflammation. But when you have something like that and you can't work out, you can't go running, how long were you away from running, and what type of impact did that have on you?
Yeah, so I was away from running explicitly for about three months, pretty explicitly. I had what was called recurrent pericarditis. Pericarditis has been in the media a little bit more from either effects from the vaccine or effects from COVID itself. Folks have been getting more pericarditis, but that's the inflammation of the sac, the sac that your heart sits in. And so when the pericardium gets inflamed, essentially it just feels like your heart's jiggling around in your chest. So it feels like if you do try and go for a run, it's like jiggle, 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 jiggle. And
wow.
it's like, just does not feel right. It just feels all sorts of funky. And so I had that, and so that'll jiggle like that when you try to go for a run. And I tried to go for like a half-mile run. I remember like a month after surgery. And then that put me out for like 5 or 6 days. Like, I was in bed and having to sleep with like pillows stacked. Cause when you have pericarditis, you can't lay all the way down on a pillow or you can't lay all the way flat cause it hurts too much. You can't lay on your left side cause it hurts too much. So you have to like sort of sit stacked up on a bunch of pillows. And yeah, so that happened. And, I kept trying to go for runs. Like I tried to do like a 3-miler and then gave myself pericarditis again. And then I tried to pace, Jade at a different time in the Grand Canyon and gave myself pericarditis again. And just every time I tried to kept coming back, I kept re-giving myself pericarditis. And so it was again, just this reminder of like, okay, gotta back off, gotta start slow, gotta back off, gotta start slow. And, so it was probably about 6 months of that, in total that I had until I could, begin training adequately again. And then it was just like, it was kind of like learning to ride a bike again. It wasn't like, oh, you've ridden a bike before, like, you know how to hop back on it and ride. It was like, no, I had to like relearn how to like trust my body. Could I go fast again? Could I go, oh no, can't go fast again. That creates pericarditis. Oh, can't do 200 meters because that strains this part of my heart. Oh, do I trust my heart? Ooh, what's that feeling? Am I going to die? Is that a new feeling? And it was just like learning to trust everything again and learning to like, was that a weird chest pain? And just this, it created a definite, one of the immediate effects was just this immense insecurity. And anybody with a long chronic injury has experienced this before. And anybody who's, had an acute injury has experienced this before. You have to learn to trust your shin again. You have to learn to trust your ankle again. You have to learn to trust your knee again or something like that after a major injury. And it was that same thing, but it was, in this case, it was my heart. And oh, has my heart rate always been that high? Has it always gone that low? And then it was at the same time, this sort of, mourning the beginning to, no, 6 months in, I was still 3 to 6 months in. I was, it was kind of like a state of denial. I was beginning to address, but wasn't fully addressing the fact that like kind of accepting that, okay, my running career as I know it may be over and I may only be able to do, kind of ideas were starting to form there as the difficulty with running progressed over the months that like, I may never be able to return to doing 100-miler competitively ever again. It may be a miracle if I can do 100-miler, much less be competitive at one. And then it was like, all of a sudden what we were talking about earlier, and that extrinsic, like, that joy that I got, was there an interest? Did I even like running if I didn't win, if I didn't get noticed, if no one cared what I was doing, if I wasn't winning? Did I even care to do 100-miler if I wasn't going to win? And that was a big question, with running in general, and that was the beginnings of a journey towards a more intrinsic motivation, and finding the joy in running just for itself. And, nowadays I'm very thankful to say, I can go on a 10 or a 12-mile run with my wife or without my wife and enjoy it because I enjoy running. And I enjoy being outside and everything like that. But it's been a journey to get to that point. I was not originally like that.
Yeah. And I certainly wasn't either. I can relate to this in a lot of ways. And I feel like I would have been thinking a lot of the same thoughts, Nick, like without a doubt. And so I think this type of long journey that you had, and it was turned into quite a mental journey, has, I think, influenced you to be really interested in sports psychology and something that you bring to Lightfoot Coaching. And so what types of sports psychology perspectives do you bring to your coaching to help athletes in terms of stuff that you've learned scientifically, but also stuff that you've learned personally?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fantastic question. So one of the first things I like to chat with people about and look at with individuals, and something I've been really fascinated with lately in training with everyone, you can ask any of the athletes that I've coached in the last few months here. One of the first things that I notice on an intake call will be how the person refers to themselves as, hey, so what do you, I may ask them a simple question like, hey, so what do you think of yourself as a runner? Or what do you think of running? Oh, well, I'm not really a runner. I'd like to be a runner. But and you notice that person de-identifying with being a runner. They're not their expectation. They may run 50 miles a week. They may run 10 miles a week, but whatever it is that their expectation of an identity of a runner is, they don't match that and they're not currently that yet. Or the person says something like, oh yeah, I'm a runner and I've been running for 10 years and blah, blah, blah. And so I already start to pick apart kind of like, how's this person's identity sit with running? Are they, really, I'll then kind of analyze and begin to look at like, is this an individual who's, I would say, what's their relationship with running after we kind of get how they describe themselves as a runner? What's their relationship with running in that regard? Looking at, do they have what I would call a strong athletic relationship, which is they never miss a workout. They can't miss a workout. If they miss a workout, that's like the worst thing in the world or whatever it is. And hell or high water, they will do those workouts because those workouts are like what they do, and they will train through injuries. They will train through everything. They'll either lie about injuries or diminish them. And they'll just, keep training. And the worst thing that can happen to an individual with a strong athletic identity is something like heart surgery or a chronic injury or something like that. Cause then you'll get thrown for the loop. Or do they have a mature athletic identity and, they're doing about 90% of the workouts. They've got maybe family, they've got a job, they've got some other, some eggs in some different baskets and stuff like that going on in their life. And running is one of the things that they do, and they take it seriously, but it's not, the one thing in their life that gives them all of their joy and pleasure. And so I start to sort of suss that out. So I'll just kind of be quietly observing that in conversation. And then, with that information, I will try to sort of subtly shift over time. If I see it as a major issue with a strong athletic identity, we'll try and make some shift towards a more mature athletic identity. One of the tangible things that I'll have people do, within the first week of, let me stop my dog from barking real quick. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. Just 1 second.
Yeah. So Nick's going to go, stop his dogs from barking, but I wanted to mention on the podcast right now, Nick is discussing strong athletic identity and whether that's a mature identity or an immature identity. And something that I was really thinking a lot about myself as he was explaining that. That's something I've never heard explained before. And it really resonated strongly with me, is that I've definitely gone through having a strong athletic identity. But at one point it was definitely, and I would say still have a strong athletic identity, but it's definitely gone from immature to mature. And immature being like, hey, I'm going to hit every single workout, no matter what, at every single every single day. And now my athletic identity is not as strong, but
sorry about that, Brian.
mature. And that is that, oh, that's okay, Nick. I was kind of talking to the show here about your explanation of a strong athletic identity and a mature one, an immature one. I mean, I certainly came from, when I was younger, having a strong athletic identity that was immature. I mean, it was make those daily workouts no matter what, at all costs. And a lot of times they come at a social cost. And they can also come at a personal cost too. It'll create havoc for my day if I get that workout in, because I don't actually have time to fit it in, but I will make sure I fit it in because it's the most important thing in the world. When in reality, it's not, but that's what I tell myself. And I've definitely switched over towards having a more mature outlook where it's like, hey, if I don't work out every single day, so be it. But also, so be it if I don't have a great workout. So if I don't have a vision where this must happen on the workout, where before when I was younger, it was like, I want the workout to be like this. And it's almost like I was pre-designing it before I even knew how my body was going to be reacting that day. And now I'm a lot more fluid with the approach towards my workouts. It's kind of like, let's just see what happens for the day. And, if my legs are feeling fantastic, well, let's have some fun with that. And if my legs aren't feeling fantastic, whatever, like maybe I'll run with my wife and we'll talk and we'll catch up and we'll strengthen our bond. But that explanation that you gave, I've not heard that before, and it really resonated strongly with me. So I want to say thanks for giving an explanation into strong athletic identity. And then also, is your athletic identity mature or immature?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Oh, I'm glad that resonated with you. And it sounds like you're working in a mature athletic identity these days yourself. So that's awesome, man.
I hope so. Yeah. And I think with me, like one of the things that really helped me out a bunch too was honestly just not racing as much. So I race. I've picked up racing a little bit more now that my wife is also a runner. And so doing races, like we will go and do them together or we'll help each other at once. So one might race, one might crew. Before I was with her though, I actually got down to a point where I was doing one ultra marathon every other year. Just because I was putting so much pressure on myself. And that was how I controlled the pressure. Now that being with my wife, I have a step up on a more mature athletic identity. And I'm able to race more often because I'm not as concerned about the outcome.
Okay, cool, man. That's super, super cool. And that was like, that kind of reminds me of like, you know, so I was on this, I guess, flash forwarding or whatever to like present day. You know, obviously I have come back from that spot where I was, and we can go visit that in detail more, but just, where I was with heart surgery, you know, going through this phase of like grief where I did go through I went through the full steps of grief there of like fully letting go of like my professional running career and like fully letting go of running and doing this sort of dramatic ceremony in front of a bunch of people of like, all right, and I'm done with running. I've let go of it. And I went through all of that, and I kind of came full circle where I've made this weird return to the sport after letting it die, and being able to compete in 100 milers again, and being able to compete at you know, sort of adventure-esque races like World's Toughest Mudder, and but going back to those, just with what you said there, how you went down to like how you went to a race every other year. I specifically picked World's Toughest Mudder this last, whatever it was, November. I picked it out because in the past I had been so egotistical and so extrinsically driven at that race that like, you know, oh, I'm doing this race for the $10,000. Oh, I'm doing this race to win. Oh, I'm doing this race for the media. And I wanted to go back to that race because that in my whole racing career, that single race is probably the one where I've been the most egotistical. And I wanted to see if I could go back this year and maybe do the best I did, maybe not. Who knows? We'll see how I did, you know. And then, but more than anything, go into it with self-compassion, go into it with self-love, go into it with just this kindness to myself, and no ego, no expectations or anything like that, and just go into it and see how I did with that sort of self and identity and everything like that. And ironically, of course, I did the best not ironically, as we're sort of talking, it makes sense. Yeah. I had the best performance that I've ever had. So.
Nick, that's a great story. And you were mentioning, you were entering that race with self-compassion and more self-kind and more self-love. But I was thinking, having come from doing that race at a very competitive level, one that, you're seeking these extrinsic validations with media and money and prizes. I was like, gosh, that actually takes a lot of courage to go back and visit that as almost like a different of yourself. Like, you've gained so much psychologically through your experiences, and to go in and have a different approach. I was wondering to myself, would I have the courage to do that or not?
Yeah.
Just cause I was like, oh gosh, I don't want to fall back into, back into maybe old paths and whatnot. So I think you going and specifically picking,
That reason alone, I mean, for that reason alone, going back to that race and signing back up for that race, given its history, was really tough on my marriage. And Jade just being knowing that race had historically been such a trigger, and I'd been following that race in 2014, 2015, and 2016. We talk about post-race depression. I was such a just miserable mope down about life and about this and about myself and about my body image and everything. Every year following that race through 2014 through 2016 when I did it. And then, so that was sort of the anticipation of what would happen following WTM this year, if it didn't go well, if I didn't have a great race or whatever it was. But it was so nice just following this race, man. It was like, okay, race happened, cleaned my hands off. Okay, back to normal life.
Love it.
Nobody in China cares. So,
Nice, nice, nice. Yeah, it's so wild how I feel like for both of us and a lot of people, we love running and we love the spiritual aspect of it. We love how much we can bond with our significant others, our friends, our family. But gosh, that coin can flip real quick into some deeper, harder, darker places that are really hard to get out of. And I was reading an article about you on I Run Far, and in it, I think there was a quote that you said, I've got a cocktail diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, complex past traumatic stress disorder, sporadic depression, and crippling worthlessness. And that's a lot, right? And for you to be able to overcome that, go into that race with all that self-compassion and self-love and self-kindness, man, Nick, that is so awesome. So
thanks,
cool.
man.
And I think like this journey that you've overcome and whatnot, like, I think it's that right there, I think is what you bring such a great service to Lightfoot Coaching, because you've actually experienced this psychology. And then on top of it, you also are getting to know this psychology scientifically too. And so I think Lightfoot Coaching is the place to be for if you want to coach.
Thanks, man. Thanks. It's been, the stuff that I've gone through mentally is I would go through at least 5 more heart surgeries rather than do what I go through what I've gone through mentally in terms of borderline personality disorder and CPTSD and all that. And, it flourished that the mental illness and stuff like that came about the same time that the heart surgery came about. And so it was just this uncoupling from if you can imagine, I had one of back to that definition of strong versus mature athletic identities. I had, I'm not going to say mine was stronger than everybody else's, but I had a very strong athletic identity. And so I was my worthiness and my placement or accomplishments in the race were very, very closely tied to one another. So whatever I did in the sport explained my worthiness as a person, as a being, as an existence on this planet. And so when that got uncoupled and all of a sudden I could no longer prove my worth, I was worthless. And as a worthless person, that's when I started to contemplate suicide. I started to get issues like self-harm and crap like that came up, and just things would easily freaking rock me, man. And it got dark real quick and stayed dark for a while. And that was certainly over the past 4 or 5 years been a real rough journey through been probably the roughest thing on our marriage ever. Again, we do like 5 heart surgeries, no problem. But I've certainly walked the walk in terms of going through a lot of therapy, a lot of different treatments and treatment options and stuff that are out there in the world.
Yeah. Earlier you mentioned just having that. I think you do have a very strong athletic identity. I also think I have a very strong athletic identity. What was interesting was when we ran together in San Diego, I actually really loved that about you. I was like, man, this guy's passionate. This guy wants to like just go out and like, we're going to kick each other's butt. We're going to suffer and it's going to be awesome. I love that about you. That's why I loved running with you. Yeah. But I could see how, it can go put you into some dark places and whatnot. But another quote that I saw about you was that it was something along the lines of, running is great and it helps therapy, but it doesn't replace therapy. Yeah. Do you remember saying that quote? I don't know if I hit that quote quite right. Absolutely.
That's it exactly. And it's sort of not a direct, I guess it's kind of a direct attack, but it's, you see on Instagram and stuff like that, you see, oh yeah, running's my therapy. Running, cheapest therapy out there. And it's just like, it's, for me personally, and I'll speak for myself personally, because it's all we can really do. Running at times could, for me, take the form of self-harm, man. Like it could be like, I would make myself run so freaking hard sometimes when I felt like a worthless piece of crap that I would, run so hard that I'd throw up purposely or whatever. And then I'd keep running after that. And that's not like a Prefontaine type of thing. That's just like no, I'm doing this to hurt myself, to put myself in a world of hurt because I feel so freaking utterly worthless that I need to externally hurt as much as I internally hurt right now. And running was a quick avenue to that. Not dissimilar to other forms of self-harm for other folks, unfortunately. And Yeah. So in that regard, running is not therapy for me. And then in other regards, therapy with a licensed practitioner is actually going to analyze your inner thoughts, your inner emotions, ask you uncomfortable things, get into uncomfortable things, unpack trauma and all of that. And that's just not something you're going to happen upon on running. You may explore some thoughts during a 100-miler or something like that. You may go down into some areas that you've never thought about and stuff like that, but you're not going to be unpacking childhood trauma in the midst of a 100-miler, like willingly, unless you've taken some really, really sketchy gels or something like that. So.
Yeah, a gel of too much caffeine, too much sugar or something. Yeah. But I gotta say, and I 100% think you're right. And, therapy is something that is a very developed service that's offered by professionals. And I don't know how to, do that for myself. And I know that one of the things that I struggle a lot with when I go running is my psychology gets into a negative loop. And so one thing that I have, and so I'll chew on something, like if say something negative happens at work, like I'll have that negative experience looping in my head, and I'll be not even really dissecting it, just more so having an emotional reaction to it. And it'll go on for like a full hour. And it's really repetitive. And one of the things that I have felt that helps me with that through running is that just picking up mantras and I'll say these mantras to recognize I'm in a negative loop, or I'll say mantras to be like, you know what, Brian, like that was a very small frustration in life. Like there's so much more better things to be grateful for. And I'll start at that point getting grateful. And then everything is great at that point if I can throw down some great gratitude. But I do enjoy testing out mental mantras when I'm out running, especially if I'm chewing on a negative experience that turns out to be a pretty small frustration in life.
Yeah. That's a brilliant strategy. I like that. So you're sort of reframing so the negative image might be something like, oh, I can't believe I did that at work today or whatever. That was so embarrassing or something. Or I can't believe I made that stupid mistake at work. And then you're ruminating on that stupid mistake that you made again and again and again, going down a spiral of that. And then you're replacing that with, well, I'm really grateful to be out here, and I'm really grateful that it's such a beautiful day. I'm really grateful that I have the ability to run. And so you're sort of getting into this place of thanks. I like that.
Yeah, it does help. I think like one of the things that I struggle with a lot as a person is if I feel like I let other people down. So, for research that I do at the university, I'm always working on teams, and it's always a research team. I'm not doing research by myself, and doing research in a team is really great because you have other people bringing in their own perspectives, their own thoughts, and it just elevates the whole research project. It's a healthy thing to do. And especially with my research projects, if I feel like I'd let someone down, that social concern, I can get that on negative loop real quick because I feel so bad. And so then I'm like, hey, what does this person think about me? Are they going to trust me in the future? And it's all just like assumptions. There's no real rationale to it. And usually I'm a lot harder on myself than what was perceived by the other person. But I can go down that, especially when I feel like I let other people down. That's something for me that I struggle a lot with.
One of my favorite skills that comes from what's called dialectical behavioral therapy to work with in that regard. And so what we're talking about is in the frame of when going on runs. What we're talking about here is in the bigger frame of there's 4 different categories in DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, called emotional control, interpersonal effectiveness skills, mindfulness, and distress tolerance. What we're talking about here is emotional control. And in the spectrum there of emotional control, so this is controlling the emotions of, in your case, the emotion that would arise would be, was it guilt for the most part there?
Yeah.
If you had to name it. So it's this sort of guilt there. And so one of these skills that you can do is called check the facts. And you go through this little list of questions, but one of the most pertinent questions that I like to ask people is, what is the catastrophe? And if that catastrophe came to full fruition, like the worst freaking possible thing happened, let your brain actually go to the end of that loop. Don't keep looping it. So if you actually disappointed this person, what's the worst thing that would happen? What's the worst thing that would happen out of curiosity?
Yeah, the worst thing that happened would not much. The project would continue on. They might not enjoy working with me as much. They may not trust me as much with as much responsibility, but it's not like I would get fired or anything like that.
Okay. So this person has this crap image of you, and now they like, don't, frig that Brian guy, he's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's doing. And okay. And then the best question you can ask yourself after that is, so, okay, what's the absolute worst thing that would happen? That takes some of the teeth out of that anxiety. And then to completely make it a toothless anxiety, you ask, how would I survive that catastrophe? How would life go on if that catastrophe happened?
Say those two questions again. I'm going to write them down.
So what is the catastrophe? And how would I survive if that catastrophe happened? How would life go on if that catastrophe happened?
And I like that it's called a catastrophe, because I think that does that help put things into place.
Oh yeah. It totally puts things into place, and it lets those negative feedback loops go to a logical end. And then yes. when you see how illogical often that illogical end is, it's like, are you kidding me, brain? What are you doing? What are you doing, limbic system? And then when you answer it with, okay, how would I survive that? Then it's like, then your brain's like, oh, well, that's not that bad. I could survive that. If that happened, which it's unlikely that would happen, I can see how I would survive that. And so, it's an interesting kind of. Yeah. Often people will be like, it's like, it'll be, well, and then I'll never get to run again. And then you have to imagine, what would it be like if you never got to run again? How would you survive that? And that's really hard at first for some people to ask. But if you can answer that question, if you can even begin to imagine what a life without running would be like, or what other sports you would get involved in, that takes this like catastrophization that most people have about an injury, for instance. It takes the teeth out of that. It takes that like negative feedback loop worry that we get about, and I'll never recover from my knee injury. I'll never recover from my, sciatica or whatever it is. And that takes the teeth out of that, like catastrophization that the mind is doing.
Yeah. I love that. And I love that a lot. I love that it helps our brain process from the emotional to the logical, as you mentioned earlier. And then when things start becoming logical, and you see it kind of logically, that is calming right there. Because I will get tightness around my chest over anxiety, because I'll be just going nuts on myself. But it's emotional. It's always emotional. It's not rational. And I do find that I do gain a lot of help psychologically with support systems, and feeling confident in those support systems. And so, both you and I are very lucky and fortunate to have, great, fantastic supporting wives. And that's something that has really helped me a lot, is just having that right there, that immediate support system with my wife. Of course, I have family members and friends too, but having that is, and I'm newly married. I just got married August 6th. I've been married 3 months here, and I have noticed the boost in my personal confidence, my personal psychology. How about that? Knowing that I have this person that is going to be loving and supporting of me no matter what. And, when I'm having those emotional negative loops, that's another thing I tell myself, and it really helps me out a lot too. But I really love that you use these questions as tools to bridge over from the emotional to the logical. And I have found that really helps me a lot when I can get things logical, because it's like, okay, it's not a catastrophe. Life will continue on. It's not a big deal. It's actually a small frustration, or very temporary frustration. So that's wonderful stuff.
Yeah.
And so with your coaching, with Lightfoot Coaching, so what kind of athletes are you working with at Lightfoot Coaching?
So we work with a variety of people. We coach anybody we coach a couple people who are, in the realm of doing their first they're trying to do a 5K every weekend with a group or something like that. And that would be sort of the one end of the spectrum in terms of who we train. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I've got guys who are going, for the Triple Crown of the 200 milers this next year. And doing races like Tour de Géants. I've got, some athletes doing races like Barkley and stuff like that. And, so a pretty wide variety of people, with all of them, working in when appropriate and stuff like that, different mindset, imagery techniques and that kind of thing. I like to, if I can, I've got a couple athletes who I meet with on a weekly basis, and those ones who I'm able to meet with on a weekly basis, we work more on psychological skills training and different, a lot of what we work on will be stuff like self-talk and what does it sound like when the person is talking back to themselves during a run. I just had an athlete, for instance, who I just started working with. That's the first thing. They've got a 100-miler coming up in like 3 or 4 weeks. So I just onboarded them. And so I've not got a whole lot of physiological training I can do with them. We're in sort of the last final 3 or 4 weeks of their training for the race, but psychologically there's a whole lot we can do. And so we're examining that individual's self-talk and just seeing how they speak with themselves, and modifying that and making sure that the messages that they're giving themselves are, either compassionate, forgiving, something along those lines or whatever, encouraging, and they're not self-criticizing themselves and just, berating themselves constantly when they're running.
Oh man, Nick, that is so fantastic that you do that. I am guilty there of a lot of negative self-talk. Not so much anymore, but going back to those cross-country days, oh my gosh, like I only use self-talk. Only like I would be like, cussing myself out. Like I would be 10 feet behind my competition and, like within reach. And I'd be sitting there just like, Exactly. Yeah. And like, I would just, every piece of colorful language that exists, it would be going on in my head. And that was the messaging I was giving myself. And then I wouldn't have as good of a race. And then I'd be awful to be around after the race. And it was just like, just horrible. And it was a lot of things to learn about myself.
Oh man. I'm sorry, man. That's tough.
Yeah, it was tough, but I'm glad that you recognize these tools to help with self-talk and to, promote more compassion and forgiving and self-grace. I think self-grace goes so long with racing, especially during these really long ultra events. There's so many highs, so many lows, everything in between. I mean, it's just a big, wide continuum of experiences that go on in a race. And, you could be having a really rough first 50 miles and you might have a really awesome second 50 miles. And so, if you beat yourself up with all that negative messaging in the first 50 miles, it's gonna be a lot harder to have a good second 50 miles. Mm-hmm. But if you have that forgiveness, that self-grace, that self-compassion, you have a higher probability of turning it on for that last 50 miles. 100%. It goes a long ways.
Yeah, no, you say that really well there. And I completely agree with that. Just, self-grace being such self-grace. And that was another thing I worked on with a couple athletes now at this point, self-grace in sort of a non-judgmental stance, and maintaining a standpoint that like, okay, so say if I'm puking my guts out at mile 30 of the 100-miler, that doesn't mean my 100-miler is over. All that means, and I'm trying to avoid future casting. Future casting is one of the, a demon that we all come across during ultras. And that's that idea of like, well, oh man, what if I'm puking right now? What if I start puking at mile 50 and then this never ends? And then mile 70 comes around and you're only at mile 30, but your brain's telling you what's going to happen the other 70 miles of the race. And if you can stay present and if you can stay non-judgmental with, I'm puking. So a judgmental phrase would be, I'm puking right now. Wow, I'm such a piece of crap. I can't believe I'm puking. My race is going to be ruined. I'm never going to finish this thing. That would be a judgmental vomit of words. Non-judgmental stance would be, I'm puking right now. Puke is coming out of my mouth. It burns. And you're present. You're thinking like a dog would think, man. Like nothing is going on but puke right now. And that's all that matters. And then you're going to be done puking. And then the next moment's going to come. And then you'll deal with that moment as that moment comes. So that's another huge part, that you can teach runners and work with runners on certainly is mindfulness and non-judgmental stance, which kind of go hand in hand with, self-grace and everything like that. And being able to approach these 100-milers and stuff. Certainly big components.
It is. Yeah. And I've never thought about that non-judgmental talking to myself and how you just explained it. I've never thought about that either. And so that was a great explanation to hear too. And I think it really does boost the race psychology, as you mentioned. And, I think like one of the things, we've been talking about the race psychology for a little bit here, and it certainly is a lot of fun to do well at races and whatnot. But, a point comes in life where, most of us aren't going to be doing super fantastic at races, and we're there to enjoy them. It's fun to do. It's an accomplishment. And it's, it's one of the things that I love seeing the most at races is people that are out there, they're enjoying the mountains. They got a smile on their face and like every picture, and you can just tell they're having a blast no matter what. Like they could, go puke, they could go run out of food, whatever. They're going to be still happy. And I think in the end, that's what we're out there to do. We're out there to have fun.
Yeah.
We got this short existence on this planet, and, so why break into all of that negative psychological messaging? But I think that you and I have been in this sport for so long. We've been runners for so long. For a while. We've pushed ourselves. Yeah. And I see people that are getting into running for the first time, and they're, say, around 40 years old, they're midlife, and they haven't maybe faced some of those types of psychological constraints within the bounds of running. They've probably faced them in other experiences in life, with just being at that stage of life. But I wonder, with starting off with doing running and whatnot in midlife, if some people have to still kind of go through that and kind of figure that out for themselves. I think it's very true. And I think that's why it's really important to bring that up and discuss it with athletes like you do at Lightfoot Coaching. So I think it's a fantastic piece of your coaching.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I think that's definitely a big part is bringing that piece in.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap things up here, Nick, I wanted to ask you one more question, and that is, what do you have planned what's on your plans for 2023?
Dun, dun, dun. So 2023, man, I wasn't letting the cat out of the bag on this. I was going back and forth with like how quiet I wanted to keep it, especially with it being the race that it is. But yeah, I'm going back to Barkley, man. So
no way, really? That's awesome,
it's
dude.
my first time back in 10 years. So the race has changed a shit ton, since I went there in 2013. There's portions of the course from what I've gleaned, that, like the North Boundary Trail used to just be the North Boundary Trail, and it was sort of the part of the Barkley that you could kind of relax on. But now Laz, through, people finishing and just him making it harder, has just like chopped that North Boundary part of the course. There's like another 2,000 or 3,000 feet of climbing in the race that wasn't there before in the past. So it's just like those loops were already hard to complete. And so now it's like, if you're going to even fathom being a finisher at Barkley, I think nowadays you have to finish like at what would have been back in 2013, like a course record type pace, I think is what's required to just finish now. If that makes any sense. So the race is a lot slower, a lot harder than it used to be. So we'll see what happens, but really again, same idea that I had with World's Toughest Mudder. It's kind of going back and visiting these, it's going back and visiting these most prolific moments. Now Barkley was a really weird one, because that is not one that I went to with an ego, in 2013. I had a very strange window there of like mature athletic identity, supreme focus ability. I don't know what the hell went on there exactly. It's kind of going back to events like World's Toughest Mudder, like Barkley, maybe Tour de Giants or something like that in the future. And again, going back to these highlights of my career with this new self, this new psychology that I have of, I know I'm skilled in self-compassion. I know I'm skilled in self-grace. I know I can be easy with myself. I know I can maintain a non-judgmental stance. I know I can be present. I know I can do all of these things that in the past I was not capable of doing. And so how well of a result can it's a curiosity more than it is like an obligation or an expectation, if that makes sense. So I'm curious to see how well I can do at Barkley.
I love it. I love it. And when is Barkley's in March?
Yeah. It got bumped up about 2 weeks. So it's like mid-March.
Mid-March. Okay. I've never gone out to the Barkley course. I think I'm actually within maybe a long drive over, because I'm in Kansas. Maybe this will be the year that I go and watch Barkley for the first time. Yeah. But I'm really excited for you, man. Like, that's great that you're kind of just, going for it with this curiosity. I know that you've had great success there. I saw something where Laz was talking about how you're just top notch with your orienteering. You're really good with the route finding, and that's something that is a major, major component at Barkley. And I got to imagine, getting lost out there, you can just lose tons and tons of time.
A ton.
So
definitely.
That's exciting to get back out there. I think that you've had such a great experience there. So
we'll see how lost I get.
So, Well, that's awesome, Nick. Well, I want to wrap things up. And just speaking of gratitude earlier when we were talking, I'm feeling really grateful that you came onto the podcast today. We haven't connected about 5 or 6 years. And I just love what you're doing, man. I think you're doing really, really great stuff. You're doing great stuff with your marriage. You're doing great stuff with your running. And you're doing great stuff for other people with Lightfoot Coaching. So really proud of you. I think it's really awesome what you're doing. So, from the bottom of my heart, sincerely, thank you for coming and joining All Bodies Outside today.
Thank you, man. That's it's like I'm taking in those compliments, and it's like they're sinking, and they're like it's hard to take those compliments, like real genuine gratitude like that. It's harder to hear that sometimes than you would think. So it's really, really, really happy for you to say that, man. Thank you so much, Brian. Really, really nice to connect with you, man.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna you're welcome, and I'm gonna throw on that outro music. We'll call it an episode, and hopefully, Nick, one of these, hopefully sooner than later, we can get together for a run. If I end up driving to see my parents in Phoenix, it's an easy stop in Sedona.
Right through Sedona. So,
yeah. All right, man.